Yes, you should shut up.
I know I'm going to trip over a cord here at some point, but
So shaky.
apparently I'm setting myself new. As I mentioned, we were hoping to have someone from Salt and Light come and present to you, someone who had been with Development and Peace on a trip to West Africa, but unfortunately he is not able to make it. So, and I was not in West Africa, so I'm not really able to talk about it to the same level of personal experience that he would have brought. So our apologies for that, and his apologies as well, that it's not going to work. But what we're going to do is to talk a bit about development and peace more generally, and how we do what we do, and sort of why or what motivates the work that we do. So as I said, over across the road, we are primarily an international development agency. That is, we work to support efforts by poor people in what we call the Global South, to change their situations, to take ownership of their situations and improve them. But we also are part of a Catholic social justice tradition. So we don't exist in isolation, just on our own, doing our own thing, but that we work with other organizations, other communities, in order to carry out that work. And you heard about part of that in the video, in that we're part of an organization, a network called Caritas Internationalis. And this is really important for when we do emergency work, because it's a network of, currently there's 165 different Caritas agencies around the world. So everywhere, almost everywhere that there's a Catholic church, there is a Caritas agency, and it makes us, being a part of that network, really helps us respond in a crisis situation, because if something happens, if there's an earthquake, for example, as there was in Haiti a few years ago, or if there's a hurricane, we have people that we can call right away who live there and work there and know the situation much better than we do, and can say, how is it that we can help? We're able to send money quickly and get it into the hands of folks that can use it in the best possible way. So being a part of that network is really important to the kind of work that we do. And it's actually, Caritas is the second largest humanitarian relief agency in the world. Anyone want to take a guess at what the first is?
I don't know.
The Red Cross is someone said, and it is, the Red Cross is the largest, and then Caritas is the second largest. So we have this huge network that we're able to respond to very quickly. But more than that, we're partners. We are a part of a tradition within the church that's really significant, I think, and so we're going to talk about that, about what inspires our work, so that you have a better sense of it, and hopefully you can sort of reflect on it as you think about how maybe you're going to go forward and work with development and peace once you leave here, once you go back to your schools. So we follow the tradition known as Catholic social teaching. This is a vibrant tradition in the church, and in particular it comes in the last 150 years or so. It really comes to the fore because the world has changed so much in that time. I mean, even in your own lifetimes, the world has changed, or in my own slightly longer lifetime, the world has changed so much. Right? I did not have the internet until I was 16. But, sad, I know, it's sad. But around the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, we saw the world really change drastically, right? People were working in factories, the world was industrializing, things were changing in a really rapid way, and people were being left behind and exploited in these new situations. And so the church, the Catholic Church, sort of sat back and said, well, what should we be doing in this situation? How should we be responding to a situation in which folks, Catholic folks or non-Catholic folks, are being exploited, are not making enough, they're working all day but they're not making enough to feed their families? how can we respond to this? And part of the way they do that is through the development and drawing on what we call Catholic social teaching. So the name is kind of straightforward, Catholic social teaching. And it's the teachings of the church built around our social relationships, our relationships with one another and with society at large. And we can think of it, or at Development and Peace, we like to think of Catholic social teaching as being like a tree, which, see, there's a picture of a tree to help you. Although now all the trees have lost. Hurricane Sandy, I guess, blew all the leaves away. My mom's name is Sandy, so it was a very terrifying couple of days for me. she was coming in the morning. So if we think of it like a tree, Catholic social teaching asks us to first start at the roots, right? Every tree starts at the roots. Start at the roots and identify what are the root causes, what are the root problems of the issues that we see around us. Right? What are the challenges that we face? How do we get to the bottom of them? And what are some of the challenges that we face? When you look around your communities or around the world, what are some of the injustices that you see? Anything? Apathy? Yeah, apathy? Sure. People aren't engaged. Anything else?
What's with the silence?
Discrimination, sure.
Racist.
Exclusion.
I can't see him.
Racism.
I knew it.
Prejudice, sexism. Yeah. Violence, certainly. We've got war, we've got violence. Poverty. Child labor. I can't even hear them, there's so many going on. Inequality. Great. Yeah. Abuse. Sexuality. Hunger, yes. So
homosexuality is a crime.
So you can identify the problems, right? And so what Catholic social teaching asks us to do is to look deeper at what are the things driving those problems? What are the things in our society that allow or encourage things like racism or war or violence or poverty? So we first identify the root causes. Okay, greediness is certainly one of them, yeah. Right? And we'll talk a bit on some of the causes in a bit. So we identify the root causes, and then we're sort of moving up. We're in the trunk of the tree now. And once we sort of pick out what some of those roots are, we reflect on them. And we reflect on them in light of the principles of our church, the teachings of our church around these issues. And we'll talk about what some of those principles are, or what some of the ones that I want to highlight are, but there's many. And then, thirdly, we get to the leaves, right? The tree bears fruit, or it bears leaves. Something comes out of it. And so we live out these principles in action. So Catholic social teaching requires action. It asks us to do something about the things that we see going on around us, right? We're not just asked to sort of recognize them and say, oh, that's too bad, but to really, we're called to act on it and to act together. One of the great things about being part of a Catholic tradition or being part of a church tradition is that we hold each other accountable, right? We look at ourselves and we look at those around us and we say, are we doing enough? Are we doing what we should be doing? And certainly we're not always doing enough. Sometimes we're falling short. But that's why we have each other to sort of look together, to reflect together and think, well, how can we address these situations? So some of the sources for Catholic social teaching then, they're going up there now, and I think some of them are pretty straightforward. Of course, first, we look to the Gospels. We look to the example of Jesus because our church looks to the example of Jesus for understanding how we should behave, how we should interact. And so we look to the Gospels where we see Jesus on the side of the oppressed, Jesus on the side of the marginalized. He stands with the poor, he stands with women, he stands with adulterers, people that the society of his time really weren't interested in dealing with and interested in helping. But Jesus stands on the side of those folks. And so we can look to this tradition as a primary inspiration for how we ourselves can behave. Right? Now, obviously, it's a difficult example to live up to for anyone. And so we recognize that sometimes we're going to fall short. But it's striving to reach that is what's going to hold us together and move us forward. And then we look at the traditions that we see in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible. And particularly we look at the books of the prophets, people like Isaiah, who really, again, they came into their communities and they really held them to account to say, do we really think this is what God wants us to do? Do we really think this is how God wants us to treat one another, to treat our neighbors, to treat our enemies? So we look to those examples as well as ways for us to think about how we can move forward and how we can address some of these challenges. And then we look at the traditions of the church. So we have a 2,000-year history in our church, and we're able to look back on how folks who have come before us have thought about these issues, reflected on these issues for thousands of years. And so we're able to take, again, from their example and from their own reflections on it and add it to our own understanding. And then a final one is the encyclicals of the church. Or who knows what an encyclical is? Anyone want to take a stab at an encyclical? No Catholic keeners in the group? A teaching, hey! Yes, an encyclical is a teaching of the church. So folks have got together, they've thought about it, they've talked about it, and then the Pope, in consultation with other folks, writes it down. He gives us a teaching to say, here's what we're called to do, here's how we're supposed to sort of go forward and live in this new situation. And for development and peace, as you heard this morning, we started in 1967, which is right after a really momentous event in the church. Does anyone know? We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of it right now. Vatican II, yes. So this was a huge shift in the church where, first of all, Mass started being said not only in Latin but in other languages. So you can thank Vatican II that when you go to Mass you can understand what's happening in it. And we, in particular, look to the traditions of Vatican II when we carry out our work because so much happened around what should be the church's role in the world. In this new, modern, changing world, what should it be